Welcome to the SImple Sophisticate podcast, where intelligent living is paired with signature style. I'm your host, Shannon Ables. And whether you're listening on your commute, exercising, working in the garden, or sitting down with a hot cup of tea or a cafe au lait, thank you for tuning in. Let's get started. Welcome to the 107th episode of the SImple Sophisticate. I hope you had a wonderful weekend. We were here doing a little bit of this and a little bit of that this weekend, and I found myself outside this afternoon simply just soaking up the sunshine and relaxing, and it was quite lovely. I hope you were able to do some either relaxing, if that's what you needed or wanted, or indulging and having some fun with friends or exploring something new. Speaking of relaxing, on today's episode, I've entitled the episode Relax, 21 Ways to Know You're Doing Just Fine in This Thing Called Life. We're going to dive into all 21 ways of how you are probably doing better in your life than you even realize. But before I get into today's topic, I want to give you a hint as to what this week's Petit Plaisir is. I promised a couple weeks ago that I'd bring this book to you, and I am going to deliver. And in fact, I also have a giveaway, and it is a book absolutely worth reading. I absolutely loved it, devoured it in less than a day. First time I've done that in a very, very long time. Anyway, stay tuned at the end of today's episode when I will share my review as well of the book. So let's get back to today's topic. This idea of, hey, am I doing okay in life? Oh, that's right. I am. Let's start off with a quote by Bob Goff. Embrace uncertainty. Some of the most beautiful chapters in our lives won't have a title until much later. I came across that quote and I just love that last thought. And it reminded me a little bit of Steve Jobs' quote about you can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only do it looking back. But it's this idea that things are working out as long as we're doing our best, as long as we're, as we will talk about today in our episode, doing so many of these other things. We may not know how all the pieces are going to fall together, but they will. And we just have to have faith in that. It sometimes happens, and this is why the episode came to fruition this week. It sometimes happens when we've been giving it our all plus 10%, in fact, for quite some time, in fact, that when we finally take our foot off the accelerator, even for a moment, or even if just to celebrate and take a deep breath, reflect on how far we've come, that our mind hasn't really adjusted yet. And as well, our body finally finds its chance to collapse so it can rejuvenate because we've been really pushing it pretty hard. And while rejuvenation sounds like a great thing and our body is, asking for it, that rejuvenation looks like to us or feels like to us as being sick. We often come down with something that keeps us in our bed, or it keeps us, we are forced to slow down. And I have to confess, this has happened, and I'm not just talking like the one day you're exhausted, you have to stay home from work. I'm talking you're out for a week, maybe two, and you're just out. You're not deathly ill by any means, but you just can't. You cannot move out of bed. You cannot. It's just, you're a completely different version of yourself. And that in and of itself is frustrating. But I have to confess this. And I talk about this only because I know it happens because it's happened to me. This has happened to me at two different times in my life. Once in college, after finishing a fall quarter while holding down 3 additional jobs, 21 credits, and contemplating calling off a wedding. And then it happened 2 years ago, and some of you may remember because it was actually a week that I didn't post anything, which was not a typically planned week off. And it was a year after I had just finished editing the book, and I had taught full time. All the while I was trying to, and I did not acquire a job in Bend. That was the year that I attempted and I got interviews and I did not get the job. So all that prepping, nothing happened. After all of that, almost 2 or 3 days after school was out, my schedule completely shifted. My body quit. My body, due to the stress my mind and life had imposed upon it, said, no more. And since you won't listen, I'm taking you down because that is what you need to get better, whether you like it or not. This is the example I share with you only to say sometimes we cannot trust what is going through our minds in certain moments because we have been pushing ourselves so hard. We cannot see the progress or how well we're doing because we are exhausted. And because our body is screaming for rest, our mind too needs a tune-up oftentimes. Often our mind, whether we've made tremendous progress but haven't reached our goal yet, or because it is just too murky to see clearly, it cannot trust that we are doing just fine. It cannot see how well we are doing or how far we have come. And because we are exhausted, we don't second guess our murky mind. We don't, say, wait a second, you're crazy. You're telling me I'm not doing well, but I am. But the thing is, we have to second guess that murky mind, because if we really were thinking clearly, after we get all this rest, we're going to know that we are doing just fine. But before we get to that point of exhaustion and complete burnout, I wanted to share this list with you today. I'm going to share with you 21 ways that you're going to look at these things and you're going to say, yep, I know that I'm doing just fine with this thing called life. No matter what my mind says from time to time, I'm just fine. Because sometimes I think we push so hard because we don't trust that we're doing just fine. And if we can find that balance in those moments where we can rest a little bit and then push harder instead of pushing until it's just we're beyond, then we won't get to that point of absolute sickness. We won't have those 2 or 1 weeks where we're out of commission. And so I wanted to share this list with you because I found after that instance 2 years ago, and I also found that I had to check myself even this year because I was pushing so hard this past year, almost for 11 straight months, because I wanted things to go so well with my teaching job, and I wanted the transition to go well here on the blog, and there was a lot of changes that were happening, and there's more changes that I want to make, and it's a huge life shift. And I think I know there were times where I needed to slow down. Because I don't want to get sick here after school gets out in a week. I have a life I want to enjoy, but it's those check-in moments that we need. And so that's what today's post is going to hopefully provide. I have a feeling that many of you are strivers and goal setters and absolute devout dreamers when it comes to embracing and diving into life. And I think this is an amazing approach to life that will open up and does open up richness of everyday, going ons, and has endless possibilities of all that we can make into our reality. But sometimes as we're busy doing, planning, and charging ahead to attain whatever it is we seek, we may question whether or not we're really doing all right. For whatever reason, doubt, an overheard comment that rattles us for a moment, or a mini goal wasn't reached on time according to our schedule. And I'm here to tell you immediately that you are doing all right. You're doing more than all right. Why? Because I've had these doubts. I've had that question dance around in my mind. Am I doing all right? Is my life on track according to my goals and wishes? And once I move through that moment and I recognize my emotions are only being heightened due to either my lack of rest or my lack of clarity for whatever reason, I sit back and I remind myself, yes, I am doing more than all right on this thing called life. And I have a pretty good feeling, so are you. So let's take a look at those 21 ways you can know, yep, you're doing pretty fantastic. Here we go. Number 1, you have a job that pays the bills plus a little extra. Enough said. Number 1, you have a job that pays the bills plus a little extra. Number 2, you eat food to enjoy the experience. You aren't scrounging for food. You aren't eating whatever you can possibly get your hands on because you don't have enough. You enjoy food. You are maybe someone who likes to cook food. You play with recipes, or maybe you just simply like to go out to good or new restaurants. You try new things. If you enjoy food, you're doing really well. Number 3, you're 75% sure of the things you don't and what you do want. Having some wiggle room. So some people may say, well, don't you want to be at 100% of what you know you want? The reason I give the wiggle room is twofold. Number 1, we're always a work in progress. We're always growing, right? I mean, to know everything is it's like being perfect. There's no such thing. We're always growing, so we're always going to learn something new about ourselves. And so we have to give ourselves that leeway. But also having some wiggle room of uncertainty isn't a bad thing, because It means that we're healthy and we're open and we're flexible to what might present itself unexpectedly. And that's the beauty of life. If we are so concretely focused on one way of living, then we really are shutting out opportunities that are going to present themselves that maybe we could have never foreseen. But when they do, we're like, oh my gosh, yes. So number 3, you're 75% sure of the things you don't and what you do want. Number 4, you understand that some emotions, can be temporary. I want to share this thought from Aristotle, which you've probably heard is pretty common. It is the mark of an educated mind to entertain a thought without accepting it. I have written this quote into my planner as a on-hand reminder to check my emotions and my seemingly absurd thoughts that happen from time to time. It's okay to have any thought you want, but it doesn't mean you have to trust it, accept it, or believe it. We all have all sorts of things dance around in our heads. We're creative thinkers. We're creative beings, for goodness sakes. But it doesn't need to be acted upon or actually spoken out loud all the time. So, and those thoughts and those things that we say come from emotions that we're feeling, whatever, good or bad. And it's important that we check ourselves. And if it's emotion that we don't want to feel, it's often, not always, something that will subside by the next day. And you'll be so thankful you didn't act upon it. So if you are someone who realizes this, who simply understands that emotions can be temporary, you're doing great. Not to say that you're not going to make some mistakes, but if you know that, that's a huge step in the right direction. You're doing fine in your life. 5, you've experienced and survived heartbreak or disappointment at least once in your life. And for most of us, it's probably more than just once. So a quote from John Steinbeck. And don't worry about losing. If it is right, it happens. The main thing is not to hurry. Nothing good gets away. Oh, I love that quote. That brings a lot of peace of mind, doesn't it? If you have taken risks, taken a chance, stepped out on a limb, and it didn't work out, but you're reading this, it means you've survived to tell the tale. If nothing else, you can use those experiences to bolster your courage as you move forward toward other dreams and goals. Don't see it as a failure. And I don't think you probably do if you're sitting here on the other side. See it as an exercise in building strength and confidence. So number 5, you've experienced and survived heartbreak or disappointment at least once in your life. And if you have done that, you're doing okay in this thing called life. Number 6, you don't need constant approval from your boss, your friends, your family, your spouse. Put another person in that space, anyone. Here's a quote from Anthony Elevato. There's no magic way to find yourself. It's not out in the wilderness or in another country or city or in the deep depths of a book or waiting in solitude. It's right there in you. And if you never find a way to appreciate yourself, you'll never see it. We have so much power that resides within us, so much power that we just need to tap into it. When we're not sure of our path, journey, or decisions, we can reach out to others for their approval. And while if we're seeking guidance from a source that is an expert in the field we have questions about, this is a wise idea. But if we are seeking approval so that we can move towards something we are excited about, we need to first give ourselves permission to leap. We're adults. We know that it may not work out. We've already survived some of those situations where they haven't. We know that. We need to trust ourselves. We need to appreciate that our dreams and ideas may be different from others. And while their support would do wonders, we must accept and take responsibility for the life that we are trying to build. Because if we believe in ourselves, when we do stumble towards that dream or path that we're really passionate about, it will be easier to get back up and keep going forward. But if we instead simply go down a path because someone else has approved of it, when we stumble, we're less likely to want to keep pursuing it because it hurt. But if we stumble doing something we love, it's okay. We're more likely to get up and move forward because we really love it. We're really passionate about it. So number 6, you don't need constant approval from your boss, your friends, your family, your spouse, etc. Number 7, you have curiosity about something and are doing something in that arena to tickle your curiosity. Maybe it is a hobby right now, or maybe it is something within your career. Whatever tickles your mind, include it in some capacity in your life. Number 8, you have a place to call home. If you have that, you're doing very well. Number 9, you have a discretionary income for simple luxuries. Perhaps it's a bouquet of flowers for the week or a decadent cup of coffee and a croissant. If you can treat yourself to these simple pleasures from time to time, you are doing very well indeed. So number 9, you have a discretionary income for simple pleasures or luxuries. Number 10, you can reflect and see that you've grown as an individual. Simply looking back just to this time last year, if you have improved in some capacity, learned a certain lesson, shifted in such a way to improve the quality of your life, you are doing very well. You're making progress. You're human and you're learning and you're just there. You're assessing and moving forward, moving forward. Number 11, you have doubts. You're human. And you still want to grow and improve. If you have doubts, that's what that's telling you. You recognize that you, as well as all of us, are and will always be a work in progress. And you also recognize that this is normal. Doubt is normal. Doubt demonstrates that you care about living well. You want to reach your full potential. So when you get into those moments of self-doubt, just remember that. Turn it on its head and say, "Oof. All right, I'm doing okay. Now, let's move forward." So number 11, you have doubts. Number 12, your bills are paid. We mentioned this at number 1, but I think it bears repeating. This is a reason to have a monthly celebration. Revel in the small things because they are indeed more impressive than you may know. Moving on to number 13, you have a friend or two who cares about you and you them. Loving, healthy relationships, no matter how many. If you have one or two, you are blessed. Number 14, you have clothes to wear that allow you to be yourself, comfortable and authentic. It doesn't have to be many, but if you can pull an outfit together and feel comfortable and authentic, you are living well. Number 15, goals. You've set them, achieved a few or more, and are now working toward a few more at the moment. Enough said. Remind yourself of the things you've accomplished, small or large, known or not known to other people. If you've accomplished something, you're going to accomplish something again because you know how to get it done. You know how to stay disciplined and persevere and finish it. Trust that this is a good sign. And sometimes we just forget what we've done. Remind yourself. Be your cheerleader. Be your own cheerleader. Number 16. Challenges. You've overcome a few along the way and you are still standing. Here's a quote from Albert Camus. No matter how hard the world pushes against me, within me, there's something stronger, something better, pushing right back. Yes, indeed. You're stronger than you realize and you've already overcome some challenges. Let that be your reminder that you can do it again. 17. You're self-sufficient. You can make your own money, get to work on your own, pay your bills, tend to the everyday errands and routines and chores without needing help. You're doing wonderfully. This doesn't mean you can't work with others or share life's responsibilities with a partner. But if you had to, you could do everything. Simply knowing this is a significant peace of mind and a very good sign. So number 17 is you're self-sufficient. Number 18, your body works for you quite well. No aches, no pains. Are you able to walk, smile, feel, taste, see, and move? Time for a happy dance. It's a pretty good thing. It's a pretty amazing thing. Number 19, you're not completely comfortable or at ease because you refuse to settle and recognize you can handle the challenge even if you don't know what it will look like. I saved this to nearly the end because I think it's important. You're probably listening to all these things like, yeah, I know I can pay my bills. I know I have a job. I know I have friends, but I still feel this way. This is a good thing. This is a good thing. It took me a long time to really be comfortable with this. And there are times where I still have to remind myself of this. But really what that is telling you, and you do need to keep it in check because you do want to be present and enjoy your life. But this idea is if you're not settling and just, okay, I've hit the point in my life where everything's perfect, I'm done. I don't think any of you guys are ever going to be that point, because you're all people who want to grow and learn, and you're curious. And if that's the case, you're not technically ever really settled. Doesn't mean you can't have certain things that, are just moving with you, certain relationships, certain jobs, your children, family members, things like that. But this idea that you're growing, so therefore everything else is dynamic too. And if that's the case and you're aware of that, you are someone who is willing to try something new. And therefore you probably are someone who has done this before. And so you know that no matter what it is that you're going to have to take on, excited about it or not, you know that you'll figure out a way around it, or through it, I should say. So number 19 is, I'm just going to say it one more time, you're not completely comfortable or at ease because you refuse to settle and recognize you can handle the challenge even if you don't know what it will look like. Okay. Number 20, I'm going to give you another one to really think about. You're exhausted because you're trying. You're doing your best. But now I'm going to give you some advice, and I'm going to give it to myself too. Now go get some rest. Become more comfortable with saying no and taking time for yourself, and be willing to adjust your schedule as you can so that you can do your best tomorrow. This kind of goes back to what I was talking about at the beginning. We don't want to push ourselves so hard that our body basically has to tell us by shutting down that, no, you've got to stop. We want to be able to recognize that, hey, I'm exhausted. I need to shift my schedule for a little bit, or I need to say no a little bit more for a while, or maybe forever on certain things. When we recognize that we're exhausted, we'll probably get exhausted again. We love life. We're in it. We're passionate about it. We got our hands dirty. We're trying. We're growing. We're frustrated at times. We're also going to enjoy absolute exhilaration at times too because of this. We want to make sure we're keeping ourselves in balance. And we can do that by listening to ourselves, getting to know ourselves. And you guys are already doing that, if not already have done that. So number 20 is you're exhausted. Last one. Number 21. You've put your feelings out there and you've made yourself vulnerable. If you have ever done this, and by me saying this, if you've already agreed to number 5, you've experienced and survived heartbreak or disappointment, you have made yourself vulnerable. You have put your feelings out there. I want to share with you a quote by Homer. Very, very simple. Very, very simple. Have patience, heart. You're not afraid to love if you're putting your feelings out there. Not that you're 100% certain it's going to work out. You may be scared to death because you may even get smacked down or ignored. And as we said, number 5, if you agreed to that, you have been at some point. But if you're putting yourself out there, if you're putting your feelings out there, being vulnerable, you're practicing a very good habit to refuse to be cynical and to be determined to have faith that you will make connections. This is a good thing. Don't change this. This is a good thing. Take a deep breath. You may not want to get right back in the ring right away, but keep putting yourself out there if it hasn't worked out yet. It will. I say that to you, and I'm saying that to myself at the same time. The life we want to live is the life we are living now, whether it seems that way in the moment or not. To appreciate where we are is to give power to the future we desire, materializing before our very eyes. So when you have those moments of exhaustion and your mind begins to play tricks on you and you question how well you are doing, take the time to glance over this list. And you can look at it on the blog, thesimplyluxuriouslife.com/podcast107. And remind yourself and your mind that you are doing just fine. Very fine indeed. And if a nap or a mini vacation is needed, find a way to give your body and your life what it needs for you to fully appreciate all that you are doing well, because you are doing so much quite magnificently. Thank you for tuning in today. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. I will include a handful of other episodes and posts that I think you'll enjoy, similar topics, this idea of 10 signs that you're on the right track, the difference between having doubts and being scared. I think those will be good complements to this particular episode. And to find the show notes for today's podcast, go to the blog, thesimplyluxuriouslife.com/podcast107. But now let's move on to this week's Petit Plaisir. I think you're going to enjoy it, especially if you're someone who's making yourself vulnerable and you're putting yourself out there for love. I'll be right back in just a moment. This week's Petit Plaisir is a book that I alluded to a few weeks ago. Actually, I think it was last week. And it is simply called The Course of Love by Alain de Botton. In 1993, Alain de Botton published his first book on love, which became an international bestseller. Maybe some of you have read it. It is a fictional tale of a man and a woman who meet while on a flight from London to Paris. Over the course of the tale, anyone who has ever experienced the angst, the confusion, the euphoria, and hope of new love will be able to empathize with either or perhaps both of the characters. Since his immediate success, he has written many essays and nonfiction works, but he has returned this month with a much anticipated fictional journey in The Course of Love, which is officially released tomorrow. Now, I had the fortunate opportunity to read an advanced copy, and as I mentioned just a minute ago, I alluded to my enjoyment of the book in a post last week when I shared the top 10 books to read this summer, as I devoured this book in less than a day. In fact, it was one of those books where I didn't even pull out a pen or a pencil to annotate. I just let myself enjoy it, because as soon as I started the first page, I realized I was going to get lost, and I did not want to slow my momentum and my enjoyment down by writing all over the book. I can read it again, and I will, but I just enjoyed this book. As we are introduced to the main characters, Robbie and Kirsten, as they are introduced to each other, we follow them through the disproportionate attention, as Botton likes to call it, given to the start of their relationship. And he commentates, the author does, in inserted italicized commentary throughout the entire novel about love, about society's perception of love, about the reality and realizations we come to find well after it would have been good to know these things. At this particular stage, when they're just meeting and just falling in love, he shares what we typically call love is often the start of love. So the journey begins, and the journey continues over the course of their love story. And Robbie and Kirsten marry, while Botton suggests, quote, "We believe we are seeking happiness in love, but what we are really after is familiarity." He will, at regular intervals throughout the novel, offer pointed assertions about love. And even if we as readers don't accept these truths that he states entirely or even at all, they certainly offer much contemplation and pondering for anyone who has been in love, who believes in love, who's maybe questioning love, no matter what place love has in your life right now with regards to romantic relationships. And so the journey continues with this couple through children and even infidelity as they work through that, as how they work through that, I guess I should say, because I'm not going to give too much away there, but it is intriguing as well as their careers. They're both professionals. One will rise, one will fall, the dual incomes and the economic balance and imbalance of each of those incomes that both of them make. We get to know this couple. And along the way, we as readers are asked to look within ourselves, to question how we see or what we expect from romantic pairings. And it is in one swift but profound statement that I found most ripe with wisdom as to apply to my own life. And that was, love is a skill, not just an enthusiasm. And this simple statement gave me pause, as I said, because we all want to be loved. I think that's the majority of the reason why we seek out relationships in general. We want to be loved. But in order to be in a relationship that is full of love, that is going to endure, that has a chance to endure, we must also know how to love, and not just to love in general, but how to love our partners. What's going to be the most loving way to care for and show our love for them? And this book dives into that as well, about the various ways that different people need love, because we are all different. And it's based on our experiences in our past and how we were shown love in our childhood and beyond. A very intriguing book, as you can perhaps hear in my voice, that this I'm still thinking about some of the statements that were made. Like I said, I don't necessarily agree with everything, but there were a lot of things that even if I didn't agree entirely, I was sitting there thinking, maybe I need to rethink this. But there were also a lot of things that I was going, yep, that's true. That's right. And it was a beautiful reminder. But my question after all of this was, where does the fault lie? Or where should I place it, if I'm going to place it somewhere, that has made me assume that I didn't need to involve this skill of knowing how to love? When did I miss that lesson? And was it ever presented to me? Anyway, that question was dancing around in my mind. And so Botton suggests an answer as the novel nears its end. He states, the fault lies with art, not life. Rather than split up, we may need to tell ourselves more accurate stories that don't dwell so much on the beginning, that don't promise us complete understanding, that strive to normalize our troubles and show us a melancholy yet hopeful path through the course of love. Definitely food for thought. That course of love, while it may never entirely run smoothly, it is certainly a course to become a better student of, if not only to improve our experience. Now I have some good news for you. I have a free copy of The Course of Love to give away to a lucky reader or listener. If you're interested, leave your comment and a way to contact you on the comments on the blog at thesimplyluxuriouslife.com/podcast107. Make sure you enter by Saturday night, this coming Saturday night, the 18th of June at midnight Pacific Daylight Time. The winner will be randomly picked from everyone who has entered, and I will contact them as soon as I go through the names on Sunday. So be sure to enter if you're interested. Otherwise, I'll provide a link to the book, and I'm sure your library has it too to check out on the blog's show notes, thesimplyluxuriouslife.com/podcast107. Again, it is called The Course of Love by Alain de Botton, and I think you're going to love it. I hope you've enjoyed this week's Petit Plaisir, where each week ideas are shared to make the everyday all the more enjoyable. Tune in at the end of each Monday's podcast, where I'll recommend a book, a film, or a recipe, anything that is a simple pleasure to satiate your sophisticated taste. Speaking of Petit Plaisirs, I am so excited to share with you that you, the readers and listeners, have been sharing your Petit Plaisirs out there on the Twitter sphere or Twitterverse and on Instagram, and tagging Petit Plaisir or the Simply Luxurious Life if you're on Instagram, or simply Luxurious on Twitter. And so I want to give a shout out to one of the listeners and readers of the Simply Luxurious Life and the SImple Sophisticate. And it goes out to Limehouse Dan, also known as London Dan, who tweeted out last Friday a picture of his drink of choice from being about town, and that was his Petit Plaisir for the day. It is really something so simple that can make our days, and doesn't even have to cost money sometimes. But if you want to share with us and all the readers and listeners of the Simply Luxurious Life and the SImple Sophisticate podcast your Petit Plaisir, feel free to snap a pic and tag me on Twitter at Simply Luxurious, or if you're on Instagram, the Simply Luxurious Life, and I will definitely be giving you a shout out here on the podcast. So it really is all about those simple little everyday things that we do for ourselves, do for others, and savor absolutely and completely being in the moment. Thank you again for tuning in. Have a great week. Thank you for tuning in to the SImple Sophisticate podcast, where intelligent living is paired with signature style. For more ideas and inspiration throughout the week, stop by the blog, thesimplyluxuriouslife.com, or pick up the book, Choosing the Simply Luxurious Life, A Modern Woman's Guide. To stay caught up on the most recent podcasts, blog posts, and receive exclusive news, as well as an extra dose of inspiration, subscribe to the Simply Luxurious Life's weekly newsletter, which arrives in your inbox each Friday morning to enjoy with a hot cup of tea or your café au lait, just in time to jumpstart the weekend. Until next Monday, I'm your host, Shannon Ables. Bonne journée.